Clive Goodchild is, as I mentioned earlier, from BA System. He's been very much so the SEN CBRN technical cluster. Clive has many years of experience working in this specific area. I met Clive first when I was working for the Commission, evaluating work at the Eating project, and that's when I got to know Clive quite well. So it's been a pleasure working with him, both in the No Fear project and also in the STAIR4SECURITY, both in the advisory capacity he's been doing. We've learned a lot from him. We've engaged quite a lot, and we've listened carefully to him as he was out there challenging and listening to the feedback of what is the perception of standardization from the community. And I think you're going to find this quite interesting because we use that knowledge to help us to drive the STAIR4SECURITY e-learning platform forward. So I'm going to give the floor to Clive now. Just one moment before I do that. Yes, I've been reminded by KPMG, we will hold a Zoom question at the end of each presentation, and so you will get at the very end, at the very last slide, questions coming to you that have been, in this case, been designed by Clive, so he would like your feedback on that way, and that will support him with his project as well, kind of go forward. So for my apologies for forgetting to say that earlier on to you all. So we now move on. Clive, I give the floor to you now.
Thank you, Tom. Checking you can all hear me, first of all. Good, okay. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, Tom. Name's Clive Goodchild, in Circle Technical Coordinator, and I'd like to give you an overview of some of the standardization activities and findings from the Encircle project. Next slide, please. So, background on Encircle. Threats from the misuse of CBRN materials still remains a high risk and is evolving. And to prove its resilience to new CBRN attacks, the EU needs a more effective coordination between all the stakeholders, whether that's policymakers, research, industry, and practitioners. And as a result of that, there was a H2020 research call initiated to create a CBRN cluster to enhance EU CBRN industry competitiveness, whilst increasing the benefits of EU research and improving security of EU citizens. So the CBRN cluster is split into two parts. The first part is Encircle, so that's the European CBRN Innovation for the Market cluster. And the second part comprises SME-led innovation projects to meet CBRN needs and gaps identified by Encircle. The project's got 5 main objectives to meet innovation, business development, market requirements. And as part of that, the project has done a number of analysis on issues related to integrations, standards, interfaces, interoperability, market and policy requirements. And that was accomplished by cooperating with EU national and international projects, the practitioner community, customer communities, and the technological and industrial base. And of course, the Centres of Excellence and the community of users and service. Next slide, please. So the Encircle standardization activities have involved 2 main areas. First was the collecting and classifying of civil protection and defence standards for CBRN innovations and operations. That information is available on the Encircle platform and has also been passed on to STAIR4SECURITY. In addition, we have conducted a number of surveys concerning what are people's perceptions of standardization, and it's mainly the outcome of these initiatives I'd like to present. This information is also available via the Encircle catalogue as well. Next slide, please. So the first results concerns, okay, what type of standards do the various communities use? So in general, the practitioner community capabilities and services are both served by a national standard or best practice or an operating procedure, then an international standard, and then that's followed by supplier-specific specifications for requirements. The technological community capabilities and services are evenly split between international standards, own supplier specifications, and then national standards. For the military community, sort of CBRN is very much a hybrid area that covers civil protection and defence. Most goods services are based on international or national standards, and presumably many of those are around stemming from the likes of NATO and those standards. Next slide, please. So the next set of findings concerns whether standards are actually useful for innovation uptake, which is an important factor in Encircle. So the good news is, in general, practitioners and the technological community believe that standards help in the promotion and uptake of innovations and help new market entrants. Next slide, please. However, things start to become more negative when we look at how appropriate are the current standards. So the military community believe their standards fulfill their requirements, so they're pretty happy with their standards. Civil protection community is completely different. Practitioner communities believe the standards have little relevance to their requirements, and the technological community is equally split in that either the standards are poor and outdated and also have little relevance to fulfilling their requirements. Next slide, please. We did some more specific assessment on people's preferred choices, because one of the issues is there's no real guidance on interoperability on what type of standards people should use in research. So for detector and sensor communications, the preference is around wired LAN, WAN or wireless WLAN. An interesting question is around the use of CBRN protocols. So the question was basically around, should there be a more standardized protocol to allow real-time transmission of CBRN data to improve interoperability? Most respondents did not know how to answer this question or did not have an opinion, and therefore we need to do some more analysis in the area. From a personal perspective, I think this is useful, because if the information is communicated in a standardized way, then that will improve information management and interoperability. The military already have standards on this, and would also take more of advantages of the advances that are being made in ICT. On a general consensus for everything, everyone believes that there needs to be a standard on civil protection symbology, or a best practice is needed here. Next slide, please. We also did a comparison on what standards were considered from the FIRE-IN project. So as part of their assessment of current and future common capability challenges, FIRE-IN identified that there's a need for development of decontamination standards, substances and equipment for mass decontamination of people, whether with handicaps or injuries. There needs to be more uniform concepts, designations, definitions within CBRN hazmat interventions. That's needed as interventions is not always uniform in individual countries and in different languages. There needs to be standard operating procedures for lessons learned, knowledge sharing and communication information channels. So what sort of key messages can we sort of draw from all the results from the analysis that we've received from the surveys and other projects? Next slide, please. So, there is an opportunity here. The consensus is standards, best practices can help the uptake of innovations and new market entrants and help interoperability. Next slide, please. Challenges are, this has to be tempered with the feedback from the communities that the existing standards are poor, they're outdated, and they actually have very little relevance to current capabilities. Next slide, please. Solution is we need a more faster and flexible approach to meet both the practitioner and the technological community requirements. It should also be borne in mind that there's implications and consequences of the cost of participating in the creating of standards and best practices, especially for small organizations. And it should be noted that standards and procedures are not the solution for everything. A key factor that needs to be considered in all these is that the standard or the operational procedure or the best practice needs to be appropriate. And in general, the recommendations are we need to initially concentrate on improving interoperability and integration of solutions. Now, to help support this, we have the two mechanisms. We have STAIR4SECURITY, best practices, and the e-learning platform to help the uptake here and the new procedures. The other area of interest is the EU Action Plan, and I'll discuss that on the next slide, please. So in February 2021, the EU published its action plan concerning synergies between civil defence and space industries. And there's a key action here concerning promotion and application of common standards across sectors to improve operational effectiveness and cost effectiveness. And actions are being considered on whether hybrid standards and best practices are required across the civil and defence sectors. Now that, as far as Encircle concern would be very applicable to our CBRN domain. This could involve defining, harmonising standards, agreeing testing protocols, best practices, codes of conduct to reduce costs, increase interoperability, and improve the potential for synergies. So before the end of 2022, there's an Action 5 that the Commission, in close cooperation with other key stakeholders, will present a plan to promote the use of existing hybrid civil defence standards and the development of new ones. And we believe STAIR4SECURITY should be actively involved in this action area as one of the stakeholders. As previously mentioned, Encircle's collected defence and civil standards and classified those. So a potential example of a hybrid standard that could come out of this would be for symbology, which has been seen to be an area where we need standardisation. And a possible hybrid standard there would be NATO APP-6, which is already an existing defence standard for their symbology, and that could potentially be applied to the civil protection domain. Next slide, please. So to conclude, we believe there's an opportunity through STAIR4SECURITY and the EU Action Plan to improve how standardisation and best practices can be better developed to improve operational effectiveness, innovation uptake, and cost effectiveness. All the information that I've mentioned today on Encircle is available via the catalogue, and we will also make that publicly available when the project completes September this year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your very clear presentation. It is obviously issues from two aspects, and I think the uptake of standardization and that relevance is an issue that comes across, and we picked that up in as we spoke to many people during the project of STAIR4SECURITY, and also No Fear. So there's clearly this work to be done going forward. That definitely, I think, the platform will help us an awful lot, because we have this common area that we can all go in and obtain the knowledge and information and work better. So again, I believe the words I'd like to use carefully is that I think we're going to have a very cost-effective resilience coming through by the use of the platform. Before we go to our next speaker, thank you again, Clive. We're going to have just a quick poll, if we can get that organized. And this is a question that's come in directly from Clive, and Clive would like you to answer this poll, if you don't mind, please. We have roughly 30 seconds between 30 and 60 seconds to do it. And before we move on to our next presenter. So we just hang on a second. And we'll close the poll about now. Okay, here are the results. So you can see the question: what is the most important barriers to overcome to ensure standardization can meet the secure society needs? And you can see that the awareness of standards and best practices, that's a key issue. So hopefully e-learning tool will help us out there. We'll talk tomorrow. Awareness of first standards, procedures, and best practices also scored high. And at least one there is language and cost and resources seem to score quite high as well. So cost and awareness of existing standard, it seems to be the message that we're getting from those who are there. And roughly we've 86 participants at this stage at the event. So yeah, we take that on board, and we move that forward. And we will put a report together in all of this. The event is being recorded, so it will be available on the STAIR4SECURITY It'll be available on the STAIR4SECURITY website later on. I forgot to mention earlier on. And the report once produced will also be put up there as well, which we made public as well. So thank you all for that, Clive. Just remind you again, if you have any specific questions for Clive on regards to his presentations, please direct them on the chat. We have one chat in at the moment, which I think Anna will be looking into. And we now move to our next presenter.